Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Payments Leaders Show. I'm your host, Adrian Evans, and I'm absolutely delighted because today we have Divya on the line. So, how are you today? You well?
Very well, thanks, Adrian. Nice to be here.
Pleasure, pleasure. Now, I think we've been speaking over the last few weeks, and on our show, we're about creating and looking at acknowledging the opportunities as well as the risks in the payments industry. So I'm really thrilled to get into that later on in our conversation. But I wonder if we could start because you have a fascinating journey and a fascinating story. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your background and your career journey to date.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And firstly, thank you for having me on your podcast. It's quite happy to be here. In terms of my career, so I've been in payments and fintech for the last 16 odd years now, and I fell into it by accident. But I'm very pleased that I did, and I absolutely love what I do. But that's not how the journey started, and we'll come to the journey in payments in a bit. But my journey started in India, in a small town in up in the mountains, in a place called Himachal Pradesh, where I grew up. And I decided, through my education, to study law. And I went to National Law School, Hyderabad, to study law, which was quite, an interesting experience. I really enjoyed it, did really well there. And then I started my career as a corporate lawyer in India. Worked there for a couple of years, really enjoyed it. But then the opportunity came to work for an international law firm here in London quite early on in my legal career as a corporate lawyer. And, I wasn't planning to do it, but I was like, yeah, why not? Let's just go ahead and see how it pans out. So I land up in London and start working for this really, interesting large scale corporate law firm as an M&A lawyer. Really enjoyed that as well. But there was always this feeling that I'm one step away from the business when I'm providing legal advice as a private practice lawyer, and I wanted to be closer to the business side, and I saw myself as a business leader eventually, and that led me to move to in-house legal practice. And my first role as an in-house lawyer at the time happened to be with a payments company called RBS World Pay. And that was a very interesting time to start working in payments and fintech, because it coincided with the time when payments regulation and payments as an industry was taking shape in UK and Europe. So my career in payments kind of started alongside that evolution in the industry. Once I started working in payments, I realized how interesting it is. What was particularly interesting was this dynamic between regulation and technology, where technology was two steps ahead of regulation, and your job as a lawyer was to kind of marry the two in a creative way, in a business friendly way, but also from a you know you know a legally compliant manner. So I really enjoyed that experience, and that led me to kind of shift my career from M&A lawyer into a fintech lawyer. And over time, I kind of ended up working with different payment services businesses, be it payment processors, gateways, card issuers, B2B payment service providers, online marketplaces, contingent payment service providers. So it's like the entire gamut of payments kind of, opened itself to me in my journey, and I really enjoyed working, understanding different aspects of payments. And what that did over time is kind of made me you know branch out from pure law to legal and compliance, to then strategy, leadership, business management. And the last 6 or 7 odd years of my career have kind of transitioned in that direction, where I wasn't doing pure law and I was doing a combination of different things. And now I find myself in pure operations roles, which I really enjoy. So, in my current role, I look after the first line operations for a large marketplace, and I really enjoy that. So that's in a nutshell my kind of career trajectory, the background, and over to you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with me. I wonder if you could tell us just to go back, because when we had a fascinating uh, pre-call or a number of pre-calls, and you shared about your this sort of strong upbringing you had and how your parents said about doing your best, but also almost not focusing on the result, but you tell us more about that story because I think it's fascinating about. There's a lesson in there for a few of us, for all of us, I think.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking that question. So when we were growing up, I come from a middle class background in India. So you have limited means, but and the thing at the forefront in any Indian middle class household back then and even now to this date is education. So the children are encouraged to do well in education. In their school and university, get ahead in life. If you want to get ahead in life, then you've got to study hard, you've got to do well and do your best. Those were the values that were instilled in us from very early on. And I come from I grew up in a village in a remote part of India, and so we had very limited opportunities in terms of, education, career progression. So a lot of it was, almost understood that if you want to, get ahead in life, if you want to be a successful person, then you've got to study hard, you've got to find ways to get ahead in life, and you move out effectively from that small remote town, because the growth opportunities don't exist in those small towns. At least they didn't at that time when we were growing up. So the idea at that time was simply just study hard, do well, and things will fall in place. If you put your best in whatever you're
Mm,
doing, the right outcomes will come in time. The outcome is not in your control. What is in your control is what you are doing,
mm,
right? So
yeah.
do your best to the best of your ability. Be honest with yourself in terms of whatever you are doing, whether that is goal setting, whether that is execution. That is what is in your control. So are you being honest with yourself? Are you doing your best in that moment with regard to that
Right.
particular objective? If you are, then that's fine. That's good enough. You don't need to worry about the outcome. The outcome will come later, sooner or later. That's not in your control anyway. So why bother about that so much? Just let it take its own course. Just focus on just doing as well as you can.
No, I love that particularly because it's just wonderful energy management. Yep. How often do we spend, you can control the pieces on the left-hand side of the equation. We can't control the outcome, but how often are we drawn into that and waste energy when we could actually be doing something far more productive with with the things that we can control. So, no, thank you for sharing that story with us. And I sense as well very much from you that you've taken that into your business approach and how you go about conducting yourself in your operations role as well as your legal role previously.
100%. I think that has been my life mantra, if you say, if you would like to put it that way, that I need to do best in whatever I'm doing, and the outcome of it will come when the time is right.
Yeah,
There are certain things that are beyond your control. There's a higher power at play as well. So let the nature take its course as well sometimes. And what's in your control, or is essentially the task at hand and how you approach it
yeah,
with full commitment, with the right values of doing the right thing, putting people first, and then let's see what happens.
lovely, lovely. So moving to the business then, obviously it seems to me about being fully present on task, but obviously mobilizing people as well, which is a fundamental component to that. You're responsible for a very complex operation with a large marketplace. So how do you go about leading? Because everything's about getting tasks done, but obviously as a leader, your sort of obligation is to do the right thing and actually engage people to the task. So how do you go about leading?
So my leadership style is, I would say, a combination of situational leadership and uh, humanistic approach to leadership. So, and I say situational because it depends upon the role that you're performing. In my current role, it is quite a heavy execution role. So execution is the mainstay of the role. If I were doing an advisory role, which I was previously in, in my when I was working as a lawyer, the leadership style was different. Then it was more about leadership by example. Just because the nature of the role was different. But I think coming to my current role, I think because it is so execution oriented, I have to make sure that I am able to firstly inspire the team to deliver, to execute the tasks well, and also I'm able to work with stakeholders who are not directly in my control, to influence them so that they are able to deliver for me. There are multiple stakeholders that I work with, my team works with, and we all work in the times when there are hard deadlines, there are regulatory requirements, there are end users that have got to that have to be paid by a certain time. They have to make sure that the experience that the users are receiving is consistent, it is compliant, it is efficient. So to manage all of that, I think it has to flow from top, like the standard of care towards our users has to be set at the top, which is what my leadership style is at the moment, where I'm defining what good looks like to a lot of my stakeholders, my team as well, and then we are trying to achieve that goal of let's get it right, make sure that we are executing against our requirements to the benefit of the end user. At the same time, we are serving our own platform too. So I think the leadership style definitely is, very much about execution. Let's go execute. Let's make sure that we are doing it consistently, and we are thinking about the customer, our customer. That is essentially how I'm leading at the moment.
So you mentioned about inspiring your team, but what messaging are you giving to team to say? Because it seems to particularly you mentioned a humanistic approach to leadership, but that starts with a why. That starts with a what why is this relevant to me? And we know this that when somebody the task that they're completing today is part of a bigger important component or a bigger important purpose. So how do you inject that sort of why into and that brings the force to that and brings the fuel?
I think there's a couple of things here. Firstly, it starts with hiring the right people. So if you've got the right team who are motivated and inspired to deliver, then a lot of the times you don't really need to think about the why, because they already know why we are doing what we
Okay.
do, right? But you know, in in any given scenario, you would set what the outcome, what is it that you're looking to achieve out of this whole experience, and that to me is not just about executing the task at hand. It is also about what is the ultimate purpose that you're serving as a team, you know and are these individual tasks feeding into that ultimate purpose. And the ultimate purpose for us is to be the support function for the marketplace, to be that A class support function for the marketplace that we are serving, such that any product that goes through the marketplace, any initiative that is introduced on the marketplace where payments is a part, it works seamlessly, it works efficiently. We're providing all the right level of support. We are being agile because there are, aggressive timelines, as you can imagine. So we
Yeah.
are being agile and we are delivering against what our requirements are. Now, the interesting bit here is that we are not just a payments business. We are also a regulated payment services business. So it's not just about executing. It's not just about serving the marketplace. It's also about making sure that what we are doing is according to the regulatory requirements. Because we are regulated, we are accountable to our regulator, we're accountable to the end user as well. So there are these different components which drive the behavior, which I impress upon my team, and which results in them adopting a sort of a balanced approach in terms of this is what we need from a marketplace perspective. This is how we can get there. And these are the, regulatory parameters within which we need to operate.
So looking at that regulatory component there, obviously being in a regulated space brings a huge amount of responsibility to it, and there's guide rails, etc. Obviously, given your legal background, I'd imagine that's pretty strong for you. So how do again you stay, well, I suppose two elements, how do you stay up to date with that? But also, how do you guide the team to say, these are the guide rails that we actually have, and we can innovate within these, and this is good payments conduct, yeah?
So on that, I think we get support from the internal teams on that as well. So other stakeholders, we have dedicated stakeholders who will, provide us regulatory intelligence from time to time, and we are all encouraged to, keep up to date on that. A lot of it is your own individual responsibility as a payments professional as well. So, we encourage our teams to go out in the market, attend as many networking events as they think are necessary, to speak to the peers, see what's happening in the industry, what regulatory developments other peers are looking at, how are those regulatory developments impacting their business models, and then compare notes with them. So those are the tools that are quite easily available. And payments is an industry where there's absolutely amazing amount of information out there.
Yes.
So if you are interested, and if you want to do perform your function or your particular role more effectively, then you will have multiple resources out there that you can tap into. So I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but there are multiple ways that I encourage my team to keep up to date on those regulatory changes. There's no one size fit all
Yeah.
approach here. It's like I said, it's a lot of it is individually driven and managed.
Yeah. Yeah, what I'm hearing though, that you taking on the responsibilities there as a leader, as supposed to be one, curious, yep, and two, then actually, I suppose that's the wonderful thing about our industry, is that there's so many people who want to help, and there's a lot of peer um, intelligence gathering given, etc. I think the ecosystem provides that sort of space as well, which is fantastic. So switching gears a little bit, what are the obviously embedded finance is, and obviously I'm a huge fan of embedded finance as a consumer more than anything else, because it provides that definition of sort of frictionless user experience and user service. And what excites you the most about opportunities within the payments industry?
I think there's so much happening in payments that it's hard to pick one area. But if I really were to pick one area,
One or two? One or two?
two. Okay, let's do two. So I think the first one would be real-time payments as a platform and not just a rail. What I
Right.
mean by that is, we've seen, you know, this global shift in real-time payments, whereby you have now global real-time payment networks such as, FedNow in the US, in NPCI's UPI in India, SEPA Instant in Europe. And what they're doing is they're shifting payments from batch processing to almost programmable liquidity. And what excites me isn't just the speed alone of it, but it's what that speed can enable. For
Okay.
example, real-time payroll and earned wage access. You can have instant insurance disbursements, for example. You can have, particularly for marketplaces, real-time merchant settlement.
Yep.
You can have embedded treasury to platforms. So there's so much that this new
Mm.
ecosystem of real-time payments that can bring to the table, provided that there's interoperability
Sure.
across these real-time payment platforms, globally. And I don't think the story ends there. I think the
Mm.
opportunity is then building products on top of these rails, right? So you think about, liquidity management tools or real-time credit decisioning tools,
Mm.
which are built on top of these real-time payments. I think that is uh, an amazing opportunity for payments. And I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a reality in the coming couple of years. So I'm particularly excited about this. I think the other opportunity is AI. How AI tools can be utilized to simplify some of the back-end processes, especially around fraud mitigation. Real-time transaction monitoring tools where
Mm,
you can utilize predictive AI to determine suspicious
mm,
behavior of users of a payment service provider. Or you can utilize AI tools to also do, payment optimization, smart routing as they call it. So I think there's a huge opportunity there in terms of what AI can bring to the table with regards to payments. We are also, there's talk about agentic commerce, for example. I have my own views on it. I'm not too excited for agentic commerce until there's clarity on who takes the liability for when things don't work. But we'll keep that to the side for now.
Yes, fascinating what you're saying there about the real time, just the real time payments becoming a platform and not just being an additional set of rails, because that just opened up so many possibilities. You mentioned a few there about almost in moment insurance payments. It's fascinating for me. They'll remain, the guilty will remain nameless, but I made an insurance claim the other day, and they sent me a check. They sent me a check. It's February 2026. Now we've recently moved house, and we were worried that they sent the check to our old house. I'm like, I couldn't even get my head around that. It was like they're sending checks. But I think the real piece as well about what that can mean for merchant settlement. I think is particularly exciting because anything that can make the wheels go faster in a secure, safe way can really help as well. And I think AI as well, as you mentioned it, I think this is fascinating how some of those back end systems. But I'm sort of with you on agentic commerce. It's interesting for me. I think there's lots of tests with very low level retail purchases happening at the moment. That could very quickly get scaled. In the UK alone, we've got contactless at £100 now with limits set to be unlimited. You just take that model and ship that into agentic commerce. When it goes wrong, who's taken that? Because somebody gave me an amazing statistic the other day, which is quite depressing in one way, which is said if fraud was a country, it would be the third largest country on the planet,
Wow.
only behind, obviously, the USA and China in
That,
terms of GDP.
that's fascinating. Not in a good way,
Not
but
in a good way.
fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. So, so, so in terms of sticking with the payments, there is, I get the feeling from you that everything sort of starts and ends with the customer for your team, for the direction, for the flow of where things are going. What does customer centricity truly mean to you? Because it's one of those terms that I think can be a bit overused, but in the industry you're particularly in, and particularly in the company you're in, it happens in real time. So what does it actually mean to you personally, and how do you bring that to life with your team?
What I mean by customer centricity is developing your payments engine according to what the customer really wants. Having a clear understanding of what outcome is the customer looking out for in their payments experience. I'm going to talk about it from a marketplace perspective because that is what I am currently working on, and it can mean different things for different
Sure, sure.
different businesses. Like if you're a SaaS payment service provider, you would be looking at a corporate customer, who's receiving that payment and the support service from you, and the answer could be completely different. The underlying theme though will be the same, which is do what your customer wants you to do, but to be more specific with regards to you know what I'm doing currently, or my focus has been for the last few years, is the consumer payment side of it, where you have your customers wanting to pay for items on a marketplace, and you have your other set of customers who are to be receiving those payments. And largely these are B2C setups, right, where you are serving consumers or individual customers by and large. And what that means for me is looking at the customer journey end to end and seeing where the gaps are in terms of efficiency and how you bridge those gaps. So you start
Okay.
with, your user interface. When the user first interfaces with your platform, what is it that you are asking them to do? How are you asking them to do? And when I say that, I mean specifically KYC, customer onboarding from a
Yeah, yeah,
payment
sure.
perspective. How easy are you making it for your customers to onboard to the platform while making sure that you are complying with your regulatory requirements of financial crime compliance and sanctions compliance and all of that? So starting from that point and seeing where how can you make it more efficient? What is the way that customers inputting that information onto your system? How quickly can that be done so that it becomes a seamless experience for that particular
Okay.
customer? So I think it is looking at the customer journey end to end and creating almost an invisible layer of payment services, which is working so seamlessly that the customer doesn't even realize that there is
Of course.
that seamless layer that exists. It's a tall order. It's not easy to achieve that because the happy you can possibly achieve that in a happy scenario, but when things go wrong, if a customer is not able to pay for a particular item using their card for various reasons, it becomes a problem. Then it's not invisible, then it becomes a visible issue for the customer, and then your customer support element comes into play. And how efficiently are you able to resolve that customer issue? How quickly are you able to resolve that customer issue? And what learnings are you taking from that experience to improve your own back-end operations, customer operations, or customer communications? Is what I'm getting at here, which is essentially looking at every single product that you are productizing or launching in your particular market. You are always thinking about how that product will be perceived by the customer, how that product will be understood by that customer, and how that product will be used by the customer. So it is that approach where every time you are talking about um, a product or even an operational matter, like you talk about, for example, operational resilience. That is a very a very specific regulatory mandate for payment services businesses. But a very large element for of that for me is customer. You're identifying your business services and you're creating resilience around them. But what is the ultimate goal of all of that? It is not just a piece of paper that you complete every year, or do a few scenario tests and out you go. That's not the end goal. The end goal is, what is your resilience framework telling you about serving the end user? Are you resilient enough to make sure that your end user is able to get paid on time every single time? So it is that bringing that lens every single time you are doing whatever you're doing in your current execution based first line role.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So I suppose that I love how that comes back to sort of controlling the controllables and staying on that left-hand side of the equation and making sure you're controlling each one of those. I suppose there's something in my mind. I see that when you've got a product that you've monetized, and we're now looking at that from a logistical perspective. But just going, what about innovation? Because I didn't even know 20 years ago that I had the need for frictionless payments. I didn't know I had the need um, to see this. But I suppose we did know with payments that we always know when payments hits the headlines. It's only when it goes wrong. When you're tapping in and out of London on a TFL or whatever it may be, and you just think this is super easy. It's only when you can't do that and you go, oh, what do you mean? I've got to buy a ticket. Oh, actually, and it's like, so how do you stay ahead there and understand actually this is working now, but almost what's the next thing? That's the next thing that's actually going to be adopted. How do you try and keep an eye on that?
I think primarily through customer feedback. So it's,
Mm,
all roads lead back to the customer. So
mm,
it's about listening to the customer and yeah, taking their input in terms of what you're building, in your payments ecosystem. So looking at the customer behavior generally, consumer behavior, again, going out and talking to your peers, and you yourself are a payments customer. You would be paying, you would be a payment service user to some other payment service providers. So when you go out and use your cards, what's your own customer behavior or expectations at this point in time? I agree. I think it has evolved over the last 5 to 10 years, where customers want to want to have seamless payment experience, but they also want it to be fast. They want it to be safe,
Mm.
right? It's moved from when the customer was happy to not use their card at all and just withdraw cash and pay cash because they they thought that there's greater safety in that approach as opposed to moving online or using their cards for small or big transactions. So I think the behavioral shift is, it becomes apparent over time to you anyway, but definitely proactively we do go out to the market, speak to our users, do surveys to figure out what is it that the users are looking from their payments experience going forward. And also, competitive intelligence, what are other peers doing in this space, what new technologies are they enabling,
Yeah.
what are the outcomes of some of those launches, are they being successful, what is the take rate. So a lot of that competitive intelligence also feeds into our planning for the future.
Yeah. Again, I'm hearing that theme coming through that's about staying so very, very focused there on what's in your control about your customer journey, what's in control about the marketplace, rather than sort of looking too far ahead to the future. And because that's always the frustrating thing, isn't it? When you see a technology that's just being created and then we're trying to get people to, I think contactless is a great example of that, where the technology was around for a long period. And a number of times I hear that in the payments industry when people have said to me, "Oh, I worked on that project 20 years ago. That technology's been around for ages." But of course, it was something, it took COVID, unfortunately, to sort of create that mass adoption of not being present. And I can't imagine not having a contactless space ever again now. That's just, but we psychology, I think we almost humans have caught up with the technology and the payments possibility, haven't they?
100%. And look, I think there's all these new technologies are amazing. I think they have so much potential, and they are suitable for certain needs, certain user types, certain business models as well. It's important to know what works for what is needed for you, as a business, what makes sense for your business model and for your customers. So what I'm trying to say, in other words, is don't just build something just for the sake of it because it's new and shiny and flashy. Is it actually serving a purpose for
Precisely.
your customers?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the test, that's the litmus test that you have to take to determine what that future would look like for you in terms of enabling new technologies on your platform or for your business.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So moving to just talk a bit wider about the industry, what is it? What's the one big myth, possibly, that you'd like to dispel about the payments industry? Do you think that there's a myth out there, or one thing that you think people should be more aware of about the payments industry?
I would like to say that um, people think that payments is work. Like an average consumer thinks that payments is simply a tech enablement, and it should work, like it works seamlessly. There's not much to it, and I don't think that that is the accurate representation. There are multiple parties that are involved in any given payment
Mm,
transaction. You have your card issuer who's issued the card, you've got the acquirers, you've got the merchant, you've got the acquirer,
mm.
you've got the card scheme, you may have a gateway service provider, you may have a payment processor. So there are
An
multiple.
orchestrator, there could be anything. Yep.
Exactly. And this is just a pure card payment transaction that we are talking
Yeah.
about, which also has multiple models. The three-party model, I'm talking about the four-party model here. There's a three-party model here as well. And this is only within the card payments. We haven't even
Mm,
touched upon other payment methods, which are wallets, or you have now account to account payments, stable coins, crypto. So there are so many, and in those areas gets even more complex. So card payments is probably the most simple, straightforward
mm.
payment transaction model that we have currently. Um, and I think that it's important to recognize that it is very complex. I also think that people do not really see payments as a risk business disguised as a tech business. And I say that because every transaction is a real time credit and fraud decision,
Yes.
whether that is a
Yes.
small or a big transaction. And behind the scenes, there are fraud models that are running that evaluate risk in milliseconds. There are issuers who assess credit exposure. There are acquirers who manage chargeback liability. There are networks who they're actually orchestrating trust between parties who don't know each other. So, I think it's important to recognize that there's a whole
Mm.
machinery in the back end that is making these real-time risk and credit decisions on every single transaction that gets completed in milliseconds.
That's fascinating because I don't forget when I first, it's many years ago now, when I first started working in the payments industry, and somebody said to me the simplest example possible, buying a cup of coffee that day with a four-party model. And as you say, there's they call it the four-party model, but there's at least five parties involved in that. As you say, add orchestration, add various. So for the simplest thing like buying a coffee, we could have 10 separate companies actually involved. We could have the same two banks or whatever, but and you just think, let alone something that's more complex like recurring variable payments or whatever it may be, or crypto, etc. And I think the interesting thing as well is like somebody said to me the other day, though, is that so who's not a specialist in the industry, but they said to me, it feels to me the payments industry is really good at going one way, though. It's only really good at getting you to spend. Yeah. And this was their sort of, it was quite interesting. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, they didn't use the term chargeback, but they used the term refund. And I was like, well, I do think the payments industry made huge strides. Like I was with a major merchant the other day. I was taking a refund, and literally before I walked away from the till, I received an email from them confirming the refund.
Wow, it's
And I was
incredible.
like, whoa, that's going that way and coming that way. But that just built trust. And this particular retailer, I was like, hey, if I buy anything now, and I think it was an interesting point you made as well in our pre-call, which do you want to tell a little bit more about that? Where I think you were saying that which could be a merchant advantage.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to actually come to that. So,
Yeah.
I don't think people really give payments its due credit in terms of how critical it is for everything else that is enabled on an online marketplace, for example, or even a offline merchant environment where you essentially, if you get the payments right, what you're doing is you are improving customer retention
Yes.
in both card present, card not present environments. And I'm saying card present, card not present, not as a disservice to other payment methods, but I'm just talking from a
Yeah.
consumer perspective, because card payments tend to be the primary mode of payment currently. So yeah, what if you get payments right, what you do is you are improving customer retention, you are gaining visibility into customer revenue, you are unlocking new opportunities such as lending to your own customers. Again, that would result in greater customer retention, or customer returning back to your
Mm-hmm.
marketplace, or your the merchant outlet for future custom. You're increasing lifetime value as well for that customer. So I think it's not just payments is not just about commoditizing. I think it is gaining strategic control over customer behavior in
Yeah.
any given marketplace scenario. You can enable so many things with, if you have the payments backbone available to you, or if you have control over that payments backbone as a merchant, you can, like I mentioned, you can embed finance opportunities, embedded finance.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you can embed like subscription type models. Again, you can embed loyalty models into your customer experience. So I think if you get that right, you're creating that ecosystem where the customer feels safe. They feel that they can trust this particular marketplace because the payments work smoothly, efficiently, on time, safe. So I think payments is infrastructure for
Mm.
everything else. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think that it has been viewed like that historically.
Yeah.
And I'd like to believe that shift is happening now, where you're seeing a lot of merchants investing greater amounts of resource and infrastructure into their payments technologies to ensure that the payments experience of the overall user journey is consistent and
Mm.
safe, and it's slick.
Yeah, that's really deep insights. What I'm hearing there is that if we use the payments experience as a way of building trust, but the whole ecosystem is built on trust, then this creates greater opportunities for customer loyalty and actually potentially customer upsell and cross sell.
Correct. 100%.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. No, that's fascinating because usually, particularly fraud, chargeback, etc., they're often seen as just sort of functional pieces. But I was only talking to somebody last week who said, no, no, this can be used as a lever for growth.
100%.
Hmm. Yeah. Excellent, excellent. So just thinking, if you were talking to somebody who was thinking of entering the payments industry. Now, I'm like you. I'm one of those sort of passionate payments people. I obviously think it's the best industry to be in. And my poor son is studying economics, and he's every example he ever gets is a payments economic model example. He said there are other industries in the world, Dad. You need to be aware of that. But what advice would you give on somebody as to why they should possibly explore a career in the payments industry?
I I think it's a fascinating space to be in because it's payments is so integral to human experience. Let's just put it that way. It is so integral that we lead a highly transactional life where we're constantly buying and paying for things, big or small payments. So it's one thing that's never going to go away. So you will never be out of job, firstly. So from a job
Right?
security perspective, there will not be an issue. And secondly, on a more serious note, I think there is just a huge amount of variety of, innovations that are happening, that have been happening in payments, that you know there's so much that you can do, there's so much that you can learn. If you have that kind of a technical bent of mind, then payments is a great industry to be in. Also because it is so deeply sort of embedded in regulation, so that these things go hand in hand. And payments is interesting also because it's not exactly being banking. So people sometimes confuse payments with banking, and those are two completely separate industries.
Indeed.
And payments tends to be, in my view, more agile, it's more innovative, so it's
Yes.
always pushing the boundaries. So I would that would be my advice. I think it's a fascinating industry. There are so many different technological innovations that have happened, and as we've talked on this podcast, there are so many more technological innovations that are on the anvil, that it makes the entire industry a very exciting place to be in.
Excellent. Excellent. So, sort of putting things, there's a question I always like to ask all of my guests, which is if you were to reflect back on your younger self to your sort of age 21, something around then, what advice would you give to yourself, sort of looking back with that sort of back looking lens?
So there's an interesting story here which I'd like to share. When I was 21, I was still in law university doing my final year, and at that time, I was planning to be a litigator. So corporate world,
Yeah.
be as a lawyer, or payments was nowhere in my
Mm.
horizons or my expectations at the time. I planned to graduate from law school and join a senior advocate, which is equivalent to the KC or King's Counsel here in the UK, back in India, and start my litigation career. And so I did apply to that senior counsel, and he wanted to take me on, but he asked me to wait for about 8, 9 months and come back to him later. And at that point, he was going to, tell me whether he wants to take me on or not. And I was very clear that I wanted to work only with that particular senior counsel and not anybody else. And that put me in a state of limbo where I was like, okay, so here I am in my final year of university, and I'm going to graduate in 4 months' time, but I won't have a job because the senior lawyer has asked me to come 8, 9 months after, and I was like, what am I going to do in that time? And it was that one moment where I was like, no, I can't leave the university without a job,
Yeah.
like I need to be employed when after having spent so much amount of, my parents' money, student loan, all of that. I wanted to make sure that I had a job. And that's where I kind of shifted from um, from that approach to going for a corporate lawyer's, sort of going for a job in private practice as a corporate lawyer. And there's no, and that kind of started my career and my journey, and we've talked about that earlier. And I think that if I was, to give one advice to that 21-year-old self, I would say, good on you. You did the right thing. I think that I there's only that what if, in your mind sometimes, which is, what if I hadn't just stuck around and, been more relentless in my pursuit for that particular career path. And I think that, looking back, I do not really have any regrets in
Brilliant.
changing my career's course. I'm very happy, satisfied with how my career has transitioned. It has not been done by design. It has just panned out in the way it has. And it's because ultimately goes back to my, a life's principle, which is do the right thing, do what's in your control, do the best of what you can in any given situation, and the results will take care of themselves. Don't try and control the outcome every single time. So I honestly, I wouldn't change much. I don't really have any additional piece of advice for the 21-year-old self, myself. I would have made exactly the same decisions if I had to look back, if I had this foresight
Mm.
of, my career journey and my life journey, I would pretty much do the same.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you. This is the stage where I try and pull together some salient points that I think for the audience that I've I think I say that the most insightful. And but I've got pages of notes here. Would you mind if I just try to gather a few of those together? Would that be
Sure.
okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Um, I always look for a theme and a single theme or a thread running through, and I think I think the doing the right thing and doing your best at what you can do in any particular moment and any particular task really for me has been the absolute theme. It's the bedrock of your value set. It's the bedrock of your mantra and how you show up, and it shows up in the decisions you've made and the careers you've made. So I think that's the pertinent theme that's come out of this for me. I think that's can be demonstrated. One, your journey, an interesting journey from both different geographies to different markets to different areas, as well as then how you lead with situationally adapting to whether it's being an advisor or now being far more of an operator and an executor, but leading. I suppose I got the sense of well, leading well by leading with integrity and leading conducting well and first. Um, I then felt as well deeply for you that customers were at the heart of everything that you were looking to do. So whether it was what opportunities are presented in the organization or in the industry, what risks are actually, well, what's right for the customer, and obviously overlaying that with the regulatory possibilities or regulatory constraints. So I didn't feel you felt they were constraints, and also the innovation that's presented, and actually that almost complex mesh of bringing those things together. I sort of said it was a challenge you relish. And then I also got the sense then that very much the possibilities from the payments industry about just saying actually this is very complex what we do or what we do, how we do it, and what's but the possibilities are endless. Yet for the right companies, I definitely got a sense for you restraint was important. Let's not just focus on building a technology just because we've got the expertise, etc. Let's right size the project again based on what's right for the customer. What are we trying to serve? And also, I got the sense as well that holistically from the marketplace that you're in, that all elements of payment are very important to you. And I got the sense, particularly the real-time payments, excited you because it wasn't just merchant, it was consumers, it was everybody involved as a stakeholder. The experience could be better for. Yeah. But I think that comes back down as we grounded it right to the end there, which was you. It's wonderful to speak to somebody with no regrets. with a level of humility as well, by the way. And yet a case of, I got a sense of trust in yourself there. And I think that echoed the second big component for me is the industry is built on trust. When we take those steps within the industry, when anybody's presenting a card, whether it's for small purchase, large purchase, whatever, there's a leap of trust that's being made, that there's a credit decision being made and a risk decision being made. So I think I ground all of that, which is in those three things for me. One, which is trust in yourself and trust in your intuition and the possibilities that will show up. And that will come about if you do the right thing where you can, and also in the moment and in the task, you give the best you possibly can, because the truth is you can only give that.
Yes, very good summary. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to leave the last words with you. Is there anything you'd add to that in any way?
No, I think you've covered it really well. It's about being present and doing your best, and doing the right thing, thinking about the customer in whichever situation you are in, or whichever role that you're performing. And overall, I think, like I said earlier, payments, I think we're only just getting started in payments. There's so many possibilities out there. So I'm very excited for the future.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for bringing those insights to life. Thank you for as well just sort of showing what the possibilities are within the industry and being a real advocate. And I wish you a wonderful day, and thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.